Hey guys, I just wanted to come to you this afternoon and show you the type of face mask that we're actually going to be making. It is this one. It has this tiny little ridge on the inside. It also has the chin cover, which can be tucked in like this if you don't need it to completely cover the bottom of your chin. So this is what we're going to be making. If you would like to go ahead and watch the video so you can be prepared whenever you come to class, that would be great. Alright guys, so I'm going to talk to you about how to cut this out. First of all, we start with a pattern piece, and on your pattern piece here, you can see that there is a bracket right there. The bracket indicates that you're going to cut this on the fold. So the bottom piece here, where the brackets are indicate that you're going to fold your fabric and then lay this edge on the fold. Whenever you are lining it up, you have to make sure that your grain line or your fold line is parallel to your selvage edge. So this edge here that is the unfinished edge, this is where the weft yarns come out. So if they run left to right, this is the edge that they form, and this is the selvage edge. So in order to cut this on the fold, we're actually going to need 3 of these cut on the fold. So I'm going to fold my fabric, and you want to be frugal with your fabric. You don't want to just whack off some in any spot. I wouldn't want to just lay it down here in the middle and just start cutting. I want to make sure that I am saving as much fabric as I possibly can. So you can see that I actually put this here, and I'm going to determine how much I'm going to need. Place this on there. Gotta make sure it's right on the edge or it's going to end up being too big. And I am using my cutting board here, so since this is like a cardboard piece, all I have to do is just press down. Okay, so you can see that I have my pattern pinned on. I have folded the fabric, I've placed the pattern piece onto the fold, and I'm going to use my tailor's chalk here to just trace around it. I could also use a rotary cutter on this, which I will demonstrate next. Remove your pattern, and then we're just going to pin this together in a couple of spots here to keep it together. Then we're going to take our scissors, and remember whenever we talked about the scissors, I said that the scissors are flat, the dressmaker scissors are flat and that is so that when you're cutting you can keep them flat. So I'm going to start here. I'm not picking my fabric up because if I did, I may not cut it straight. So you just keep your fabric on the table, keep your scissors flat on the table, use your hands as your guide, and cut directly on the line. So this is the first one that we had to do on the fold. The next one I'm going to show you is, I'm going to cut one more on the fold, and then I will show you how to do it with the rotary cutter. So when you open it up, this is what it will look like. Okay, so you guys can see that I just moved it down from where I had it. So this was where I had cut the previous piece, and all I did was just move it over. It was still folded from before. So once again, I'm going to draw the outline of the pattern. Typically, if we were using store-bought patterns, we would pin our patterns on and cut directly onto the pattern, but since we're using pattern templates, we are going to trace. I like to use pattern templates because that way you can actually keep your patterns a lot longer, and for this purpose, each student will get their own pattern to take home, and you can use this multiple times over and over and over by tracing it. You can also stack at least 2 ply of folded fabric together. So you could cut 2 of these out at one time if your fabrics are folded over together. Here again, just keeping my scissors on the table, flat down, and then bring this piece over here and snip that. Go ahead and trim that excess fabric off, toss it, and we have pattern piece number 2 right here. Now for the third one, we are going to use the rotary cutter, and I'm going to show you how to do that with our same pattern piece. And this is the edge that our fabric was folded before, so I'm just going to continue to fold. This is our self-healing cutting mat that we had discussed in the tools earlier in this unit. So I'm going to fold my fabric and here again place it near the end so that I'm not wasting any fabric. Okay, so I'm going to just draw my outline once again, holding it down. You can do this on smaller pieces, but it may be more difficult to do on larger pieces to hold your pattern piece in place. But you can use weights to hold your pattern pieces down. So now that we have that, I'm going to go ahead and place a pin in the middle just to keep the fabric together. And I'm going to use my rotary cutter here and just go right along this edge. If you wanted to stack all 3 layers up, believe it or not, the rotary cutter, when you have a nice sharp blade, will cut through all 3 pieces quicker than your scissors will. So this is your finished piece, and that is piece number 3. The next step is going to be to iron 2 of these pieces in half so that the wrong sides are together. So you guys can see this is the wrong side, this is the right side. You will hear me say that often in sewing, wrong side, right side. I hate to even say this, but this is the iron, and many people have not seen an iron when they get to high school. So you want to make sure that these irons do have an auto cutoff, but at the end of each class you want to make sure that you have unplugged it. When you're using the iron, you need to use the blue gloves, and each of you will get a glove for each class, so please make sure that you keep up with it at your area. So we're going to put this on the edge here, and I can go ahead and have the entire thing folded in half, and I'm going to go ahead and lay this one directly beside it. So on this iron right here, it has a timer button, and if you come over and you don't see the green light, but we've been using the iron, it's because the timer has automatically shut it off. So you just press that button so the green light comes back on. Give it just a couple of seconds, maybe 20, 30 seconds to heat back up, and then press. So you're going to lay your iron on top of your fabric and just hold and press. So the difference in pressing and ironing is when ironing you move your iron back and forth. Pressing is when you lift up, press. And you are pressing a nice crisp seam here, or folded edge in your fabric. Alright, so I left this on here too long, and there is something on that iron, so we'll have to make sure we put this on the inside. And I will clean the iron up. So I'm going to just press, or iron actually, this other piece so you can see the difference. Press is when you press down and hold, irons when you move it back and forth. Alright, so now that we have all of our pieces pressed, we are going to lay this piece, the ironed piece, that I ironed in half, on top of our flat piece with the right sides together. Remember we talking about the right sides? I'm going to lay it with the right sides together. Alright, so they should just barely touch like this. And then we're going to place a pin on the end here. And when you pin, you should always pin so that your pins are perpendicular to where you're going to stitch. So if we stitch through here, this would be perpendicular to the stitch line. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and put a couple pins in the ends. You also want your pins to stick off of your fabric like this so that they're easy to pull out as you sew. So we're going to put 2 on each end and then maybe 1 in the middle just to hold it in place. So we have them on the ends. And I will stick 1 more here and here. Okay, so you can see that I have 1 more pin right here in the center of this. And 1 here. And then 2 on the ends. Okay, now we're going to take it over to the sewing machine and sew. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and thread the top part of our sewing machine with the white thread and then insert our bobbin in here. So just as a refresher, to thread the top part of the sewing machine, we have to follow our thread guides in the back and then come down through here and down around, back up to the take-up lever, around the take-up lever there, and then we're going to come down to the thread guides there, bring it around with the thread guide underneath, bring our needle threader down and around, catch it, and now we're ready to sew with the top part of the sewing machine. And to get our bobbin inside the bobbin case, we're just going to insert it like this, pull it around so that we see the little slit right there, and then pull it up around like that and insert it into the bottom of the sewing machine, making sure that the little arm on the bobbin case is sticking up and in that little groove like we talked about before. Hold your top thread in your left hand, turn 1 complete turn, and then pull up, and you will see that you have your bobbin thread pulled up and ready to sew. So now we can place this back on here. We're going to be using a 3/8 inch seam allowance, and if I zoom in here, you can see the 3/8 is right here. Okay, so you guys can see 3/8 is here, which is the very first line beside the foot, and then if you move it over just a tad, you can see the 5/8 is 2 over from there. And that is what we typically sew on, but for this project we're going to use a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Now I'm going to go ahead and line that up with the 3/8 inch line, and I'm not going to watch my needle at all. I am only going to keep the edge of my fabric on that 3/8 inch line. But before I do, I want to make sure that my stitch length is set on 3. So I come back up here and just bump my stitch length up to 3. Now I'm ready to sew. So we start with our presser foot down, needle in the fabric, and I'm going to sew a couple of stitches, and then I'm going to press and hold my back stitch button to go all the way to the end, then let go. And like I said, I am only looking right here at the 3/8 inch line. You must pull your pins out before you get to them. You do not want to sew over pins ever. Okay, so I've come all the way across to the end of this first piece. Now I'm going to lift up my presser foot, and I'm just going to cut that thread off on the side, bring it around, put my presser foot down. I can go ahead and take out that next pin. I have it lined up, the edge of my fabric lined up with the 3/8 inch mark. And you guys need to go really, really slow. But do you see how I'm holding this fabric? I'm not really holding the pattern piece. Let me back it up a little bit. I'm not really holding the pattern piece or you know, holding it really tight or anything. All I'm doing is just laying my hand on top of it to guide it as it goes underneath the 3/8 inch here. Okay, so I'm only looking at this 3/8 and I'm just kind of moving it with my hand to make sure that it stays on that 3/8 inch mark. I'm going to back stitch because I'm at the end. Lift up my presser foot. Cut the thread. I'm going to always try and cut all of your threads off so you don't have so many of them. And you can use your small scissors at your table. Your sewing scissors here. Alright, now, this is an outside curve. An outside curve would be something like a bust line curve or a dart maybe. I mean a hip curve. So on a outside curve, meaning it sticks off the edge of the body, you would notch it out. So just like we'll learn about notches in our patterns, a notch is just simply a small triangle. So we're going to just take a few notches out of this, and what that does is helps to reduce the bulk of fabric that's in that seam, so you don't have so much fabric in the seam or crowded up in the seam. And it also, on outside curves, helps it to lay flatter. So I'm going to go ahead and just notch out a few of those on each of these curved sides here. Alright, the next step is going to be to serge it. So, or actually to press. So we're going to fold it over so that it is right side out. And we're going to take it back over to the ironing board. And we're going to press these sides here down so they're nice and flat. As we discussed before in our tools, this is the tailor's ham. It looks like a ham, and this is used to press curves, especially outer curves. So I'm going to take and just open up my fabric here, and you'll see how nicely it actually bends around your tailor's ham here. So you want to press all of your seam allowances so that they are facing in towards the inside of your mask. I'm just going to fold this around it here, make sure they're going down. And this is going to give you a nice, clean, pressed edge. Okay, now that I have pressed all of those sides nice and flat, and you can see on the inside how it's pressed nice and flat to there, I'm going to fold it over on that seam. So here's our seam. I'm going to fold it here and fold it here. And the reason for pressing it flat is because it's going to lay better. Do we have to get it? nice and flat there, and I can press down on that seam once again. Top stitching is typically when it is 1/4 inch away from the edge of the fabric, and edge stitching is when it is right on the edge. So both kind of serve the same purpose. We'll call this one edge stitching because I do want to go ahead and do it at 1/8 of an inch, which will be right at the edge. Okay, so with this stitch, we want to do an edge stitch, and we're going to put our needle, you can see it move here, we're going to move it all the way to the right as far as we can get it. So you can see the dot is here, just press the right side button for the needle. Okay guys, so I went ahead and serged the inside here. So if you watch the serging video, you see that it trimmed, and it can trim seam and finish, but I don't have it set to do that. I just have it to trim it and finish the edge. So we're going to now fold this back like it was pressed earlier. And we're going to top stitch. So I put my presser foot down, I move my needle all the way over to the right side and insert my needle into the fabric, sew, back stitch, and I'm using the edge of my foot as my guide here. So that ends up being 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, even though if you did not move your needle over, it would be 1/4 of an inch seam allowance when you're using the edge of your foot as your guide. So I'm only looking at the edge of my foot. Needle down. And watch the edge of your foot as it goes around the outside area of your seam line. Okay, now we're going to lift our presser foot up. And this is what it looks like whenever you are finished with that section. I'm going to go serge across the end here and then show you how to close it up. Okay, so the last thing that we're going to do is to insert our drawstring. And I'm going to do one that actually ties around the back of your neck. So what you're going to do is, this is just a piece of t-shirt knit, and I gave it a nice stretch here. So I'm going to snip off this little excess. I'm going to lay this down on the edge here and fold it over. So you can see it's folded over about 1/2 an inch there. And you guys can place a pin in it to help hold it in place for you. So this is one of the times that you're going to want to place your pin in the direction of where you're going to pull it out. So like in the direction of your sewing. Let me actually use a yellow pen so you can see. So I have placed my pin here in the same direction that I'm going to begin sewing, and I'm going to put my foot down so that this is actually lined up on this side this time. So the seam allowance is going to be right up against, well, the seam allowance on this side is going to be 1/2 inch. However, I want to pay attention to this side because that is going to allow me to sew right on the edge. And this time I'm going to actually move my my needle to the left. So I'm just pressing that left needle button all the way over. So it ends up being to the left. So if you look at it here, you can see that I have moved the needle all the way to the left. I'm going to make sure that my drawstring is out of the way. I'm going to go ahead and put my needle down in my fabric, and I can pull the pin out. Give this a little stretch on this end as well, because that just kind of gets it tight and out of your way. And you're just going to start backstitch, and you want to backstitch fairly well because this is going to be what's going to hold everything together. So we're just going to stitch all the way down using this edge as our guide, and backstitch again, and then come all the way to the end. And we have finished one side. So now what we're going to do, so you can see here that we have finished up with this one side, getting the drawstring in. Just going to trim it up while I have it right here. Trim my threads. I have trimmed up this and trimmed this side as well. And now I'm going to just fold like this. So if you guys can see that, it's sewn on this side, and then it makes a loop on the top. And we're going to just fold this over here 1/2 inch, just like we did, encasing our tie on the inside like that. And we're going to pin once again so that we can pull the pin out. So you can see here it's pinned, and we're going to place it underneath the needle. Make sure that our tie is out of the way. We're using the edge of our foot as our guide. Put our needle down. Give our string a nice little pull to make sure it's out of the way. And remove our pin. Backstitch all the way to the edge. Sew down. And continue sewing using the edge of your foot as your guide here. Continue sewing. Backstitch. Come all the way down. And I am finished with my face mask. Make sure you trim all your threads, and you have a nice little face mask. And the cool part about it is this part on the inside here flips up and this flips down. So this becomes your nose piece and this becomes your chin piece. And it fits like, so I'm going to take and put the head strap over the top of my head like this so it comes around my neck. And then to fit it, I'm just going to put my nose piece on and then pull the chin piece down. Pull these straps. Pull it around. And you can get this one as tight or as loose as you would like it. Now, you pull this up over your ears like this, and then it comes around and ties in the back. And I have mine a little tighter than I really want to wear it, but that's the cool thing about it because it's adjustable.